4 centuries of Roman rule in Britannia came with Emperor Claudius in 43 AD. And the Britain they found was inhabited by different Celtic tribes. The Celtic Britons had many cultural similarities to the Celtic people of Gaul, who we know had druids, who were revered religious leaders. They appear to have had a worship that revolves around the natural world, and we've been left some clues such as hill forts about the way in which they operated. However, upon the Romanization of Britain, these Britons adopted the pantheon of Roman gods as well as those of other cultures such as Germanic, who were often recruited into the Roman military and sent into Britain. This resulted in a Britain that had a wide variety of different pagan gods, as it was common for different cultures to adopt the gods of others, gods whom they saw as powerful or beneficial to them. In the beginning of the 4th century, 313 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, which decriminalized Christianity, as he himself was to profess Jesus Christ as his Lord and Saviour. At this time, Christians were a small minority of the Roman Empire, but the conversion of Constantine made Christianity spread, and by 380 AD, Emperor Theodosius I issued the Edict of Thessalonica, and Nicene Christianity was declared the only authorized state religion of the Roman Empire. Therefore, Christianity was firmly established in Britain by the 4th century. The Roman military in Britain appears to have played a large role in bringing and keeping Christianity, as we see some of the oldest churches close to military forts, such as Hadrian's Wall and the Welsh fortifications of Llanbegbig and Cargai. Whilst you may have heard that Christianity in Britain completely vanished after the Roman withdrawal, the distribution of material evidence, inscriptions, and place names indicating church sites such as Eccles, derived from Latin ecclesia, meaning church, suggest a level of Christian continuity, as Romano-British people would have still identified as culturally Roman and Christian. Although the church in Gaul dispatched the bishops Germanus of Auxerre and Lupus of Troyes to Britain in order to combat a Christian heretical movement called Pelagianism, spread by the British monk Pelagius, who suggested that humans can achieve salvation and moral perfection through willpower rather than divine grace. Northward of Hadrian's Wall, we have evidence of Christianity in these Brittonic lands from the 5th century onward, in the form of place names, church sites, and Christian Latin inscriptions. The Latinus stone was found in Whithorn, which was the home of Candida Casa, the church established by Saint Ninian, who, according to Bede, played an enormous role in the conversion of the southern kingdoms of the Picts. Christianity in the northern reaches of Pictland was credited by Bede to the Irishman Saint Columba of Iona, who lived in the 6th century and established an abbey on the island of Iona, which lies in the Inner Hebrides off the western coast of Scotland. By the 7th century, Iona would preside over a large network of monasteries that stretched across multiple kingdoms in North Britain, and was so influential that the abbot of Iona would have priority over the bishops across the area which the network spanned, described by Bede as contrary to the usual method. Whilst St. Columba received an enormous amount of credit for converting the Picts to Christianity, the reality was that the abbey and the Irish clerics gradually converted the Picts throughout the 6th and 7th centuries. But it is pertinent to remember that some communal acts can often be solely attributed to saints by later Christians who subscribe to the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, not necessarily to be manipulative or dishonest, but because their culture and faith leads them to put so much stock in canonized individuals. By the 8th century, Iona had enormous influence and power over the kingdoms of the Picts, as well as the kingdom of Dalriata, leading King Nectan, Mac Dair Ilay, to turn to Ceolfrith, abbot of Wearmouth Jarrow in the 710s, for religious advice which ultimately allowed the Pictish king to establish his own standardized church, which would follow a Roman religious heritage, such as the Roman Easter calendar, a topic that was currently fracturing the Ionian clergy. It also put him in the good books of one of the most influential men in Northumbria, the powerful kingdom to his south. Here, we begin to see clear evidence of how Christianity was becoming deeply entangled in secular matters. Now, before we get on to the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons, it might be helpful to briefly go over how Anglo-Saxon paganism took form in the lives of those people who hadn't converted to Christianity yet. Firstly, terms like pagan and its equivalent used by Germanic people, heathen, are Christian terms used to define others, usually more rural folk who hadn't yet been converted. When Christians like Bede describe paganism, they often make assumptions that the paganism they encounter was an organized religion like Christianity. Although the evidence we have suggests otherwise, there seems to be no standardized or single form of Anglo-Saxon paganism, as is the case with the Celtic paganism found in Britain. Some sites, such as Edwin in Northumberland, were hill forts with a presumably Celtic pagan origin, but evidence suggests that they were used for Anglo-Saxon paganism, presumably in the latter days of it. As by Bede's account, during the 8th century, his attitude seems to suggest that paganism is already becoming a thing of the past. We have evidence of the Anglo-Saxon gods in our days of the week, such as Wednesday being Woden's Day and Thursday being Thunor's Day, but we know very little about the reverence of them or the relationship people had with them. Since we could never understand what the inner belief of these people truly was, we only have material evidence to go on, and this is extremely limited. But it appears very unlikely that Anglo-Saxon paganism was anything like the organized religion of Christianity. It's unlikely that they all met on a certain day of the week to offer prayers and requests to Woden, for example. It's much more likely that this folklore was their way of rationalizing the world around them. We have examples of them believing that elves were the cause of mischief in their lives, such as a sudden, sharp pain, like a cramp or arthritis, being referred to as elf shot, as if they'd been shot by the arrow of one of these mystical creatures. So with this in mind, it's quite easy to see why the pagans of Anglo-Saxon England were not too challenged by the idea of converting, because it wasn't disrupting a standardized form of religion. It would be much different to, say, for example, today, expecting a large amount of Muslims to convert to Christianity or Judaism, and vice versa, expecting a nation full of Christians to convert to Islam or Judaism. It was almost as if they were just adding something else onto the already existing life that they were living. It's widely accepted that the first Anglo-Saxon king to become Christian was Athelbert of Kent, who converted in 597 AD, with thanks to the mission of Pope Gregory, led by St. Augustine of Canterbury. It is apparent that he also was heavily influenced by Queen Bertha, his Christian Frankish wife. Though despite his conversion, it was not forced upon his subjects. Further north, King Edwin of Northumbria marries the daughter of Athelbert of Kent in 620, and she takes north with her a bishop called Paulinus to tend to her religious needs as well as to evangelize throughout Northumbria. While still a pagan, Edwin renounced the worship of idols thanks to his belief that the prayers of Paulinus allowed his wife to survive childbirth, and also believed the prayers of Paulinus were the reason that he recovered from a serious wound. Edwin is an interesting character because it appears as though he was unwilling to convert to Christianity without serious careful consideration. Bede's account, albeit a century after the fact, reimagines this contemplation of religion as a meeting with his advisors, which highlights the lack of satisfaction found in the pagan beliefs that he would have currently held at this time, ultimately resulting in his pagan priest Coife renouncing his beliefs and setting off to destroy any existing pagan shrines or worship sites. Whilst the details of this story are likely to be the imagination of Bede for poetic purposes, The contemplation of Edwin and the conversion and actions of Coife were probably drawn upon the real historical accounts that Bede had available to him and should not be dismissed as complete falsehood. Bede's account shows conversion as a conversation rather than force. Similar to the Christian apologetics approach, for those unaware, apologetics means the justification of beliefs, from the Greek apologia. We have a letter from the 720s from Bishop Daniel of Winchester to St. Boniface, which he sent whilst on missionary work in what is now modern-day Germany, which details the method he used to great success in order to convert heathens to Christianity, further evidence of conversion without violence or force. His letter essentially encourages the Christian to ask questions of logic. For example, if they contest the universe always existed without a beginning, who created it? Who rules it? How did they bring under their sway a universe that existed before them? When and by whom were the first god or goddess constituted or begotten? Do they give birth to other gods? If not, why have they stopped copulating? If they do, their number must now be infinite. Bishop Daniel encourages them to ask the heathens why the Christians are winning, wealthier and happier than they are if their gods are so powerful. He encourages them to make known to the pagans that the Christians know of the despicable practices they undertake, but it is very clear on not being irritating or offensive, but to be calm. This is a fascinating insight into the methodology of conversion. It may even be considered a very modern approach to challenge logic and use apologetics that modern theologians would still use today. So we've discussed the top-down approach of conversion by ministering to the elite, as well as the bottom-up approach to conversion which saw missionaries challenge the beliefs of everyday pagans. And seeing as the last Anglo-Saxon territory to be converted was the Isle of Wight in 686, it's fair to say they did a pretty good job. Although this top-down approach went beyond simply converting the kings, we see much of the Anglo-Saxon elite class really take to Christianity, which you would infer would spread to the lower classes as they follow their examples. There's material evidence of this conversion in the upper classes, such as the Coppergate helmet, which dated back to the second half of the 8th century. Christian iconography, in particular the set of silver spoons found at the Sutton Hoo burial hoard, which has been attributed to Radwald of East Anglia, who died in 625 AD, right in the time of that conversion to Christianity. However, according to Bede, Radwald would have a Christian altar alongside his traditional pagan altars, which encapsulates this period of religious crossover where pagans had not entirely abandoned every aspect of their previous way of life. We have further evidence of the Anglo-Saxon elite adopting Christianity in a profound sense through the poem The Dream of the Rood, which part of can be found on the 8th century Ruthwell cross. The poem is written from the perspective of the cross on which Christ was crucified, adopting the persona of Christ's sworn follower or servant, and I would recommend reading it because it's genuinely a beautiful piece of literature. But the language it uses relating to the bond between Lord and man is clearly directed at the aristocracy, who could truly empathise with the scenario and understand the message that it's getting across, whereas a peasant may not. And despite a 7th century saint's life claiming there could still be idol worshippers found in Cornwall, Britain was majority Christian by the year 700 AD. But in the 9th century, there was an army on the horizon waiting to change all of that. Much of the details of the Viking invasion can be found in my Alfred the Great series. It was the first videos I ever did, so maybe they're not that good. My style's kind of evolving as I go. Give it a go and see if you can learn anything from it. I hope that you can. I would like to make a video on the conversion of the Vikings, but it would take a lot of time and research, which I'm totally prepared to do. But my field of history is Anglo-Saxon, England. So anything around that, I have to learn, I have to get to grips with, find out the details of, which I'm totally okay to do because I enjoy it. It just might take a little bit more time. If anyone's actually made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. That's crazy to think about. But I'm so grateful. But yeah, please subscribe. Love thy neighbour, even if they're a muppet. And yeah, Godspeed.